Alrighty, guys, let's try to do some learning today. We're going to learn the Ruy Lopez, I think. So this is how I am going to try to study these lines. I've played the Ruy Lopez. I've played a little bit of Ruy Lopez before, and I know that I'm not all up on all of the major lines that take place. So I'm going to start doing some studying on it, and I'm going to do my studying with you guys, and you guys can help me study. So the reason we talk about the Ruy Lopez is it is one of the most popular openings. You'll see it all the time. I'm going to look at it from the perspective of Black's pieces because I think this is the way that I've seen it most. Since when I'm playing the white pieces, typically what I'll do is my bishop will end up here, on the c4 square, which is the Italian game. And so the times that I've seen the Ruy Lopez has been on the receiving end of it, where I was playing the black pieces and my opponent went ahead and moved to b5, starting the Ruy Lopez. The Ruy Lopez is named after a 16th century, late 1500s Spanish monk or priest who was one of the first people to really write about theoretical chess and chess openings and chess lines and things like that. So you're talking one of the oldest actually written works on modern chess. And this line, which is also one of the oldest ones, is named in his honor. There are many variations in the Ruy Lopez. We're just going to look at a few. So the Spanish game, right? Ruy Lopez. You can see right there. All right, so the first thing that we need to look at is Black has two very traditional moves from this standpoint, and I have played both of these, and this one move is the extent of my book knowledge in Ruy Lopez. I know that Black can move this pawn, basically chase away this bishop, or Black can say, you know what, that's fine, I have this knight protected, so even if you do try to exchange it, that's fine, I'm protected. I'm going to go ahead and just make principled moves and get my knight out. Now you notice the main reason, or one of the main reasons that white makes these three specific moves, it's the same reason why we do it in the Italian game, is so that we can get castled early. Black needs a little bit of development in order to get castled. So some of the lines are going to show us what happens when the knight moves, and some of us are going to show us what happens when we go ahead and make this, kind of force either this exchange or this retreat. Let's go ahead and look at this knight move. So the knight f3 is known as the Berlin defense. It's one of the ones that I've played, like I said, because I view it as a standard type of developing move. The experts who have played these games, many games for, like I said, 500 some odd years, then have several lines that they follow up. Most notably, white continues this plan and gets castled early. And from here, Black has a couple of options as well. One of the main ones is what's known as the Berlin endgame. The idea being that I can sort of tease out an early queen trade to kind of force us moving to an endgame. Maybe white is not prepared for an early endgame, but me as the black pieces, I'm going to start driving this. And you'll see both halves of the board feel like they're in a good position. So let's go ahead and try this Berlin early endgame. It moves with this knight capture on e4. White then responds. It can either put pressure here on this knight, but this knight has an escape square, or it can go ahead and drive down to this particular point, where you notice once this pawn moves to this square, it is now defended, whereas Black only has two defenders. So you've got it's not an imbalance yet. It is currently still imbalanced, but it puts pressure on this central square. At which point in time, one of the defenders of this pawn and one of the attackers of this square is this knight. So this knight is being attacked by the bishop. We can go ahead and move our knight back to a square which moves it out of the dangerous kind of crossroads and attacks this bishop at the same time. This bishop will then do what its job was to do, which was to eliminate the defender here So bishop captures on c6. We're going to go ahead and open up our queen line to go ahead and get that line open up early. Now the defender of this pawn is gone, so we can go ahead and capture this pawn with tempo, and at which point in time I have to move my knight back out of the way, and you'll see the most resounding place to move it is back into the center of the board, where it is defended by this bishop, but now we have this queen exchange. So the queens get exchanged, and at this point in time we now have the Berlin endgame. The idea being that white has forced black to lose castling privileges, right? So black has moved its king, so it can no longer castle. White is saying, I have 3 pawns on the queen side, but it is going to do a really good job defending against these 4 pawns. So black is saying, I've got a majority over here. I've got 4 pawns to your 3, but because of the way the structure is messed up, they're not really 4 full-powered pawns. And these 3 are going to do a great job of blockading them. White is also saying, I have nearly a passed pawn directly in front of the king. That could be a threat come down as we go down the road. And black is saying, we're in an early endgame, and I have 2 bishops, right? So I've got 2 bishops. I've got the bishop pair in the endgame, so I feel pretty comfortable. So both black and white are very happy with this board setup. This is known as the Berlin defense, which one of the lines moves into the Berlin endgame, or the early endgame. So that's one line to look at. What I will then do is I'm going to start playing some games to try to see if I can force this structure out. The idea being that when my opponent plays this, or if I play this as the white pieces, I'm looking for this Berlin response. And then from there, we're going to see if I can force this board structure to end up in, where we did, so that I can learn how these games play out. That's all I'm trying to do, is give myself a little bit of repertoire so I can then play these games out the way the experts would and kind of take advantage of their knowledge base. All right, so let's back up. Let's look at the next variation. We're going to go ahead and delete all those moves. So now we're here. The next way you can move, instead of moving to the Berlin defense, you can move this pawn and attack this bishop directly. There are a couple of variations that then move from here. White can go into the exchange variation, where they take this. The whole reason to get this bishop out early was to get castled, but hey, it's also we can make the exchange, right? Or we can retreat and defend. Now, typically when this bishop retreats, it's going to retreat this direction. The idea being that I just spent an entire move getting my bishop all the way out here. If I wasn't planning on making that move and I'm going to move it right back, why not just stop there to begin with and explore the Italian game opening? Or why not just leave it there or back here? So why would I spend a tempo to bring my bishop all the way out just to turn around and then bring it back? So one of the escape squares is to move to a4. This can lead us down lines that are known as the closed Ruy Lopez, or it could lead us into something that's like that's called the Morphy defense. The one that I see most typically at my rating level is the Morphy defense. I have also heard it called the Archangel line. I have only ever seen that written down in one place, and I have not been able to back up exactly why it's called that. But the way I learned it the first time was the Morphy defense. And that is black is going to continue to press their counterattack. You can see here, it's Morphy defense. Black is going to continue to press their counterattack, forcing this bishop to walk back. Now, the first time I saw this, my first thought was, why is this a popular opening? Why is this an opening that has survived for over 500 years when it seems to be counterintuitive on both sides of the board? One of the chess principles is don't move the same piece over and over and over again. And yet here I have moved my bishop once, twice, 3 times in succession. Another tenet of chess is don't make a lot of pawn moves. Well, by doing that, I have I have encouraged black to make a bunch of extra pawn moves. So both players lose tempo by making these extra moves. At this moment in time, white is saying, I've got a very strong diagonal. and black is saying, I'm keeping you from controlling the center, and white is saying, but I still have some influence on the center. So there's a lot of back and forth on this. Typically, the way that this will continue is you'll see things like this knight f6 will come. Sometimes you'll see a bishop c5. So white is looking to castle, and black is definitely in need of castling. So white has some development, black has less development, and black is nowhere near castling. So both sides say that they're happy with this formation, but when I play this game, I typically feel, for me personally, I typically feel that white is a little bit stronger. I am not an expert. My rating is very low, so don't take my word for it, but according to the database, white does have an advantage with this kind of structure. So yes, this counterattack is very strong and can lead to some very strong games for black, but it is also something to take into consideration that white is very happy to play this game. So if white is happy to play this game, what's a different option we can look at? So let's back up here and delete these. So let's make another a6 move. Now we force white to move their bishop out of the way. Instead of continuing the attack, let's go ahead and let's get developed. So our knight f6 move, we're going to go start developing. This is very similar to the Berlin defense, but notice we have already gotten this early a6 move in. We've already pushed white's bishop back, and now if white wants to make an exchange, now they're also continually to losing tempo, and I have not messed up my pawns in the process. From here, we're going to see this bishop move to e7. There are a couple places that this bishop could go, but by moving this bishop to e7 is where we end up in the closed variation. The idea being closed, meaning there's not a lot of exchanges taking place. Black is going to go ahead and get castled. Most likely, white is going to do something preventative or maybe make another principled move. But the idea is that there's not going to be a lot of exchanges taking place, which is why it's called the closed. Typically, you'll see, and yeah, if you look at the database, this rook e1 move protects this pawn so that black can't try to snag a free pawn. It also does not allow that endgame variation that we talked about earlier, because it defends that pawn a completely different way. So black is not going to take it and start looking at an early queen exchange. And one of the reasons why black doesn't want to do that is because black is going to want to castle. We now have gotten our pieces out, and we can now get castled. This bishop could go to any number of squares, but parking it here behind the knight is one of the most common that you'll see. And if the experts say it's good, then I'm content to learn it that way. Next to move is, I lost my place, b5. It says, oh, that's right, b5 is the next move. This is, again, driving this bishop away. We have already taken care of any possibilities of an exchange because we know we've already discussed that. So we've already gotten ourselves set up to castle. The previous Morphy attack that we looked at, black was not ready to castle, and so black was in a worse position, in my opinion. But now we have gotten our castling prepared, so now is a great time to make that attack. White is going to go ahead and move their bishop out of the way. Black can go ahead and castle. And now here is where white is going to make some moves that sort of balance out these early pawn moves. White needs to make a pawn move. And the reason for that is this bishop, we have just spent a lot of tempo chasing it around, right? This bishop is going to end up parking here. White has spent a lot of time trying to protect these bishops and make sure it has those bishops available to him in the endgame. Black has done all of this. Remember, one of the principles of the game is to control the center. One of the ways black is looking to control the center in all of this is to make this c5 move. This c5 move exerts some pressure, but mostly over the center of the board. Notice we've got a pawn there. White wants to push d4 to get that control. By preparing d4 with this pawn move, we can defend d4, and we give an escape square for our bishop. Black is looking to push c4 to take wrestle control back of that square, and one of the ways to do that is to move this knight out of the way. Well, conveniently, if we move the knight to here, we are attacking that bishop, which White has spent a lot of time at trying to protect that bishop. So we attack that bishop, the bishop moves, we can now get our c4 move in. White will then counter attack or look for control by moving to d4, which they've got it prepared. So there is a lot of tension building here. There is 1, 2, 3 attackers on that square, so I can't capture it. Notice I've only got 1 defender of it, 2 defenders of it, so I need to get a 3rd defender on it so I don't lose material. I can park my black knight back over here, which gets it solidly in the square, the center of the board, and starts preparing for whatever exchanges start to take place. But notice throughout all of this, material has not been exchanged, hence the closed Ruy Lopez. Now when we look at the board, black is in a much better position than it was when it did just the straight up Morphy attack, or the Morphy defense, excuse me. I have 2 knights sitting happy and pretty in the middle of the board. I am castled. White also has a knight in the center of the board. They are castled, and they have got some strong diagonals, which they are controlling with their pieces. We are now looking at fighting for control of the center, and and we have lots of ways that we can control the center from both sides of the table, right? Look at all of this influence back and forth. So both players would say that they are in a good position. And really, that's the best you can hope for in an opening. So the Ruy Lopez closed variation. Black has control of all of these squares because of these pawn moves. White has a lot of control and influence because of their strong pieces. Now, eventually, this knight needs to get out. Probably going to end up taking some kind of walk over here, since notice these squares are nice and open already for that knight to walk through. The knight probably does not want to go to the edge. Remember, a knight on the edge is dead. I know that's not the great. Or a knight on the wing is a useless thing. So those are kind of some phrases that go through your mind. So this knight is probably going to end up along here. Even if we park it here, if this knight ever gets, let's say that black decides to push and then try to pin, then having this knight here means it can defend up that way and replace itself. So there are a lot of things that can happen from here, but this is the Ruy Lopez closed variation. This feels very much of a positional type game where everybody's looking for incremental advantage. Nobody is relieving the tension because there's all of these potential captures that could take place, and each player is waiting for the other to make a mistake, and they're just going to try to roll this incremental advantage. This plays very similar to the Italian game in that kind of mindset of incremental advantage, looking for positional games. So this is type of game that I will probably look at playing more, simply because I have experience with the Italian game. And finally, there is the exchange variation. Let's go back and look at that. Delete from here. Delete all those moves. So when black makes this a6 pawn push, instead of retreating with this bishop, the bishop can just go ahead and exchange. One of the principal moves of chess is to usually capture towards the center to control the center, but this is one of the cases where black will capture away from the center. Now, yes, it does open up this queen. That's why you do it. And the reason you do it, notice that we're not quite in that Berlin endgame because my knight is not here to attack this pawn. This is called the exchange variation. One trap that black is looking at is white has essentially a free attacker on this undefended pawn. There is no attacker on their pawn, so therefore they don't have to worry about defending their pawn, losing tempo by defending their pawn. It is not a trap so much as what happens if white gets a little bit greedy. If white gets greedy and goes here, now that I've opened up that pawn, I can move my queen all the way up to d4. That attacks both the knight and the pawn. You cannot save both. So in this case, white needs to choose which one to save. So let's say we save the knight by running it right back. Well, my queen can step over and get my pawn back, so we're back equal in material. You have one piece developed, I have one piece developed. Yes, you have 4 pawns, and I only have this weakened structure of 4 pawns. So there definitely is some compensation there. However, at this point in time, the only way to remove yourself from check is either to exchange the queens here. So this is another way to force a curly queen exchange, or to move the king out of the way, which forfeits your castling privilege. So this is another kind of exchangey type defense or attack, depending on which side of the board you're playing from. A lot of these examples and training I found show you from the white perspective. I'm showing it from the black pieces perspective, typically because when I'm playing the white pieces, I play a little bit different games. So this is a great training exercise for me. So this is known as the exchange variation. From here, there are tons of options and tons of lines available. This one is one that's common. Notice I cannot move my queen out of the way. I could move my queen back here to force the exchange on my terms. I could protect that queen here to, again, force the exchange on my terms. I could even do something like this, you know? So there are lots of options from this point of view, but the big kicker to keep in mind is when you see this structure, go ahead and capture away from your queen so that your queen can be prepared to recapture the pawn, put some pressure on their knight. And let's say that maybe they make a mistake. Whoever is playing this, they're not paying attention. They think, oh, I can just attack the queen. Well, then I'll just take a free knight. I mean, it's not going to happen, obviously, but these are the kind of air quote traps that people need to watch out for when you go for this kind of exchange variation. Anyway, so these are 3 different lines that we look at. We looked at the exchange variation, we looked at the Berlin defense, we looked at the closed Ruy Lopez. There is one final line that we probably want to look at, which is known as the open variation. I don't know a lot about the open Ruy Lopez, but let's take a look at it. The idea being that it's going to have a little bit more of an open board structure. And I think it goes something like this. I think we do the same a6 pawn move. The bishop goes ahead and starts getting out of the way. At which point in time, the knight is going to capture, I think, no. See, I don't know what happens next. You know what, I'm going to hold off on this one. The open Ruy Lopez, like I said, I don't know it very well. It's asking for some trades that I'm not quite comfortable with yet, and I don't know the lines to expect. So I'm going to hold off on the open Ruy Lopez. As we play some games with the Ruy Lopez, we will look for those kind of patterns and see if the open Ruy Lopez shows up. But in the meantime, we've got 3 good. Let's go ahead and remove these again. We've got 3 good lines to look at. We can look at when we're playing games, we're going to look for these patterns so that we can try to follow what the experts say. We hit the Ruy Lopez. We can either Berlin defense, or we can either closed Ruy Lopez or exchange variation. So those are the 3 those are 3 very common lines. And I think those are the ones that we're going to keep our eye out for. And then down the road, we'll look at what the open Ruy Lopez and maybe some of the other different lines that the Ruy Lopez can lead to. But all right, so this is training along with me. This is how I train. I've picked up several popular lines, and now I'm going to go play some games and try to see if I can end up in these positions so that I can then look at my notes, figure and follow along with what the experts say, and then try to notice what opportunities it presents for both sides of the board. All right. So as we learn together, you guys will get to learn from my mistakes, and hopefully you'll get better. And then, yeah, we'll all get better and have some more fun at chess. All right. All right, guys. Talk to you later. Bye.